The wire snapped between the blades, and for 1 full second nobody on that base was breathing. Elena Vargas was on one knee in the dust with a 14-year-old's heartbeat thudding against the back of her own hand, 2 timers running side by side in front of her, and the manual on the ground beside her was screaming one color, while every instinct she'd built over 14 years screamed the other. 9 seconds. That's all the clock had left when she made the choice. She looked at the red wire the book told her to cut, and she did not cut it. She reached past it, into the part of the device that wasn't supposed to exist, and she closed the blades on the blue. And the counting stopped. 23 men were standing inside the radius when it stopped. They didn't know yet how close they'd come. Most of them never would. But 6 months later, a major in a clean office with clean hands would write 11 words on a form. Operator severed the blue conductor contrary to TM 9-1375-215-12 and tried to end her with them. Because by the book, she was wrong. And the only thing standing between Elena Vargas and a court-martial was the truth that the book had been wrong first. Pull up a chair, friend. We're gonna walk through all 9 of those seconds. But first you need to understand the woman whose hands didn't shake. Her name's Elena Vargas. Sergeant First Class, United States Army, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. That's the bomb people, the ones who walk toward the thing everybody else is sprinting away from. 36 years old that November in Mosul. 14 years in Edie. And if you know anything about that career field, you know that's a long time to keep your luck. Because it's the kind of work where the odds don't love you and most folks rotate out to something quieter before the math comes due. Elena didn't rotate out. Elena kept walking toward the things. 14 years of it. She came up out of the Central Valley of California, out where the heat sits on the land like a flat hand, and the almond orchards run to the horizon in rows so straight they make your eyes ache to look down them. Her people picked in those orchards, some of them. She was the first in her family to ever put on a uniform, and I'm told her mother cried when she signed the papers, and not the good kind of crying. Because Edie was not what anybody pictured for the quiet girl who used to take the toaster apart on the kitchen table just to see how the little spring inside worked, and then put it back together so it ran better than it had before. But that right there is the thing you've got to understand before we get back to those 9 seconds. Elena wasn't drawn to the bombs for the danger. Edie gets some of that type, the adrenaline chasers, and they don't last, because the work punishes a racing heart. Elena was drawn to it for the puzzle. Same reason she took the toaster apart. A bomb, to her, was a thing somebody built on purpose to fool you. A machine designed by a human mind for the specific job of killing the next human who touched it wrong. And the whole art of the work, the entire thing, was to be smarter than the mind that built it. To sit down across from a stranger's intention and outthink it. Slow. Quiet. Hands steady, breathing slower. And Lord, could she keep those hands steady? The men she served with had a name for it. They called it the dead pulse. They said you could be 30 feet back behind the barrier, sweating clean through your shirt, your own heart going like a trip hammer, and you'd look down the line at Elena Vargas kneeling over some piece of hell in the dirt, and she'd be as still as a photograph. They swore, and soldiers exaggerate, I know that, but enough of them swore to it that I believe there's truth underneath it. They said if you put 2 fingers on her wrist while she worked, you'd wait a long, long time between beats. The dead pulse. She didn't get calm by fighting the fear down. She just didn't seem to carry it while she worked. It came later, some of them said. 3 in the morning, the way it always does for those people. But never on the job. On the job, she was the stillest thing in all of Iraq. She came up under a man I've got to tell you about, because he matters to this story, and he matters to a couple of others I might get to one day. Master Sergeant Reeves. Her instructor when she came through the schoolhouse, and the kind of teacher the good ones never stop hearing in their heads. Reeves had been doing the work since before Elena was old enough to drive. Hands like old cracked leather, and a way of talking so slow you wanted to finish his sentences for him, until you learned real quick not to, because every word that man let out had been weighed twice before it left his mouth. And Reeves told her a thing, early, that she carried 14 years, and carried straight into the 9 seconds I keep promising you. He said it to the whole class, but Elena always felt like he was looking dead at her when he said it. He said, "The manual is a dead man's memory. Every page in that book got written because somebody, somewhere, met that exact device and lived just long enough to write it down. Which means the book is always behind. The book tells you what the bomb makers were doing last year. And the bomb makers, children, they read the book too. The book is your floor. It is not your ceiling. The best ones, the ones who get to be old like me, the best ones know the exact second the manual is wrong. And they know it because they understand the machine better than the page that tries to describe it." And then he'd tap that manual on the table, 2 slow taps with one leather finger, and he'd say, "Don't worship this. Understand it, and then be ready to put it down." Elena Vargas put it down on a Tuesday in November of 2018 in Mosul, with 9 seconds on the clock and 23 lives on the table. And every last thing Reeves ever taught her came due all at once. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set the table proper. Mosul in November of 2018 was a city coming back to life over the top of its own graveyard. The big fighting had moved through and burned itself out, but a place doesn't heal clean from what that city went through. The west side was still rubble in long stretches, whole blocks pancaked down to gray dust and rebar, and under the dust there was no telling how much ordnance still slept. That's the thing people don't picture about the after of a war. The war leaves its teeth in the ground. Shells that didn't go off. Caches that got buried and abandoned. And the homemade stuff. The stuff the bomb makers had spent years perfecting, getting cleverer with every iteration, learning from every device that worked and every device that didn't. Edie didn't get to go home when the city fell. Edie's work was just getting started. The forward operating base where Elena was working that month was a small one, the kind that doesn't make any maps you've ever seen. Concrete blast barriers stacked in a rough square, sandbag positions, a motor pool, a med tent, a chow line under a stretched tarp that snapped in the wind all day long. Couple hundred souls inside the wire on a busy day, fewer on a quiet one. Soldiers, a handful of interpreters, some contractors, a rotating cast of folks passing through. It was the kind of place where everybody knew everybody's face if not their name, and where the perimeter was the whole world, and outside the perimeter was a question mark. That Tuesday was supposed to be a quiet one. I want you to hold on to that, because it matters to how the rest of it lands. It was late afternoon. The heat had broken into that long gold hour the desert gives you before dark, the hour where the dust in the air turns the light thick and everything goes soft at the edges. Some of the soldiers were near the chow line. Some were at the motor pool with a vehicle up on jacks. A few were just standing around the open ground near the gate, doing the thing soldiers do most of, which is weight. 23 of them, give or take, scattered loose across maybe 100 feet of open packed dirt near the southern gate. Nobody clustered. Nobody alert. A quiet Tuesday. Elena was in the Edie shack on the far side of the compound, and what she was doing when it started, and I love this detail, because it tells you everything. What she was doing was cleaning her tools. She had them laid out on a clean rag on the workbench, the fine cutters and the probes and the little mirrors on the telescoping handles, and she was going over each one slow, the way another soldier might clean a rifle. Reese had taught her that too. Your tools are your hands once removed, he used to say. A dull blade or a loose hinge will get you killed just as dead as a dragline. So she cleaned them when there was nothing else to do. It settled her. It was the toaster on the kitchen table all over again, 30 years on. The quiet pleasure of a thing that works because you made it work. And then the gate started yelling. Here's what happened at the southern gate, pieced together later from a dozen accounts, and I'll tell it to you plain, because it's important you see it the way it actually unfolded. A figure had come out of the broken ground to the south, walking. Walking slow, hands already starting to come up. Small. The soldiers at the gate saw a kid. A boy, 14 years old, maybe younger, than the way the kids over there were thin after everything. He was walking toward the wire with his hands rising and his face doing something that none of those soldiers ever forgot, a face caught between terror and a kind of pleading. And he was saying something, the same thing over and over, and one of the interpreters near the gate heard it, and the blood went out of his face. The boy was saying, "They put it on me. I don't want to. They put it on me." Under his shirt, around his torso, was the unmistakable bulk of a vest. Now I need to stop here, because there's a thing about that moment that you have to understand or none of the rest makes sense, and it's an ugly thing, and I'm not going to pretty it up. The people who built that vest did not build it for the boy. They built it for the base. The boy was the delivery. They'd put it on a child on purpose, because they had run the cold arithmetic and decided that a frightened child walking toward a gate with his hands up would get closer than a man ever could. They were betting on the decency of the soldiers at the gate. They were weaponizing mercy. And the most monstrous part of the whole monstrous design was that it might have worked, because every instinct a good soldier has is to not fire on a child with his hands up, and that hesitation, that flicker of human decency, was built into the device as surely as any wire. But the boy did a thing the bomb makers hadn't planned for. The boy was trying to surrender. The boy didn't want to be the bomb. He'd walked toward the gate not to get close enough to kill, but because he was a child looking for the one place a child looks when the adults in his world have turned into monsters. He was looking for somebody to help him. And by the time anybody at that gate fully understood what they were looking at, the math had already changed in the worst possible way. Because he was inside. Not at the gate. Through it. In the confusion of those first seconds, the hands up, the kid's face, the interpreter shouted words. The boy had crossed the line. He was inside the wire now, maybe 40 feet in, standing in the open packed dirt near the southern gate, shaking, crying, his hands up in the air. And in a loose 100-foot circle around him stood 23 people who had no idea, yet, that the quiet Tuesday was over. The protocol for this, and there is a protocol, the Army has thought hard about this exact nightmare. The protocol is built around one cold central idea. You cannot let the device get to the people. If a vest can't be reached and rendered safe in time, you control the situation by controlling distance. You move the people back. You establish a cordon. You evacuate the radius, and you let the worst happen in an empty circle if it has to. The book is written in the language of the greater number. The book will trade 1 for 23 every single time, and the book is right to, because the book is written by people who've had to make the trade with their own eyes open and have learned that hesitating to make it costs more lives, not fewer. So by the book, here is what should have happened. Pull everybody back hard and fast, get them out of the radius, establish your cordon at a safe standoff, and then, if the device starts its sequence and there's no time to disarm, you do not send a human being in after a ticking vest. You let the clock run in an empty circle. You lose the boy. You save the 23. That's the trade the manual makes. And I want you to sit with how reasonable that is, because the whole story turns on a woman who looked at that reasonable trade and saw a way to refuse it. The call came across to the ED shack as a scramble, the worst 3 words in that career field strung together, vest, inside the wire, and Elena Vargas set down the probe she was cleaning, and she did not hurry. The men who saw her come out of that shack all say the same thing. She moved fast, but she did not rush. There's a difference, and it's the difference between living and dying in her line of work. Rushing is fear with its hands on the wheel. Fast is just a body that already knows exactly what it's doing. She came out pulling on her kit, and her face, they said, had already gone to the place it went. The dead pulse. The stillness. She was already across the table from the stranger's intention, already starting to take it apart in her head before she'd even laid eyes on it. She got the picture in pieces as she crossed the compound at a hard walk. Vest. Inside the wire. A kid. 23 in the radius. And as she moved, she was already doing the thing that made her what she was, already running the cordon math, already knowing in her gut what the book was going to tell her to do, and already starting, somewhere underneath the dead pulse, to hate it. Because Elena could see the open ground from across the compound now, could see the small shaking figure with his hands up, and she could see something the book hadn't accounted for and never could. She could see that the boy had stopped walking. He'd planted himself, 40 feet inside the wire, in the exact wrong spot, in the dead center of those 23 lives. And he was too scared to move another inch. You couldn't pull the people back fast enough to clear the radius from where he stood. Not all of them. Not in time, if that clock was already running. The motor pool crew was boxed by the vehicles. The chow line had nowhere to scatter but into more open ground. The book's clean solution, evacuate the radius, let the clock run empty. The book's clean solution didn't fit the actual geometry of the actual dirt that afternoon. Somebody was going to be inside that circle when it ended. The only question the book left her was how many, and the book's answer was 1, and the 1 was the boy. Elena Vargas looked at that, crossing the compound with her tools in her hands, and somewhere in the stillness behind her ribs a different question started forming. Not how many. A harder one. What if the book's wrong about there being only 2 choices? And then she was at the edge of the open ground, and there was no more time for questions, because now there was only the boy, and the vest, and the long walk across 40 feet of dirt that every cell in a normal human body would refuse to take. She took it, one steady foot in front of the other, walking toward the thing everybody else was running from. 40 feet of open dirt is nothing. You could cross it in a few seconds at a stroll. Elena crossed it slow, and she crossed it talking, because the first thing, before the device, before the wires, before any of it, The first thing was the boy, and a terrified child with a bomb on his chest is its own kind of device, one that can go off from panic alone. She'd ordered everyone she passed to start moving back. Quiet, fast, no shouting, because shouting would spook him. She'd waved the cordon out wide as she came, pushing the soldiers in the radius back as far as the geometry of that compound would let them, which wasn't far enough, and she knew it wasn't far enough, and she filed that knowledge away cold and kept walking. The interpreter trailed her at a distance, close enough to relay, far enough back to maybe survive. And as she came into the boy's space, she dropped her voice into something low and even, the same voice you'd use on a spooked horse, and she had the interpreter put it into the boy's language soft and slow. "I'm here to take it off you. You're going to be okay. Don't move your hands. Keep them right where they are. Look at my face. You're going to be okay." She didn't know if it was true. "That's the thing I want you to hold." She told the child he was going to be okay, while she had no earthly idea if either one of them would be alive in 5 minutes. But the lie wasn't for him only. The lie was a tool too. A calm operator makes a calm patient, and a calm patient holds still, and holding still was the whole ballgame. She came down onto one knee in front of him, and now she could see it. It was wrong from the first look. I told you Elena read bombs like other people read faces, and the first thing her eyes told her was that this device had not come off the same bench as the one she'd been seeing all year. The vest devices around Mosul had a signature, a way the makers ran their wiring, a habit, a handwriting, the way you can tell 2 letters came from the same person without reading a word. This one didn't have that handwriting. This one was neater, more deliberate. Someone who knew more had built this, and the part of Elena that lived for the puzzle went very, very quiet and very, very awake all at once, because a smarter maker meant smarter traps, and smarter traps meant the book was on thinner ice than usual. She kept her face perfectly empty for the boy and let her hands do the seeing. She eased his shirt up, slow, narrating every motion through the interpreter, so the kid knew nothing she did was a surprise. And the vest came into the light. 2 timers. Now you have to understand what that means in her world. 1 timer is a clock. 1 timer counts down, and at 0 it fires the charge. And your job is to stop the clock before 0. Simple to say, hard to do. But 2 timers, wired the way these were, is not 2 clocks. 2 timers is a trick. It's a thing the smart makers had started building precisely because they knew what the book told operators to do. 1 timer was the real one, running down to the firing circuit. The other was a liar, a decoy, wired to a collapsing circuit, which is the nastiest idea in the whole ugly craft. A collapsing circuit doesn't fire when you complete it. It fires when you break it. Cut the wrong wire, the wire the book trains you to cut, the wire that on every honest device kills the clock. And on this one you don't kill the clock. You close the trap. You complete the very circuit you were trying to open, and the charge goes off in your hands. The book, TM 9-1375-215-12, the document a major would later wave like a sword. The book said cut the red. On the devices the book was written from, red was the firing line, and severing it broke the circuit to the charge, and the bomb went dead. Red was right. Red had always been right. Red was right on every device that had taught the book its lessons. But Elena was looking at this one, and this one had 2 timers, and this one had handwriting she'd never seen, and as her eyes followed the red conductor, she felt the bottom drop out of the floor Reeves had warned her about. Because the red wire on this device didn't run to the firing circuit at all. It ran to the decoy timer. It ran to the collapsing circuit. The maker had read the same book she had. The maker knew that a trained American operator, working fast, working scared, would reach for red the way you reach for a light switch in your own house in the dark. And the maker had wired this device so that the trained, correct, by the book reach for the red wire was the one move guaranteed to kill everybody. The blue wire, and there shouldn't have been a blue wire. Blue wasn't in the standard layout. Blue was part of why this device was wrong. The blue ran to the rail firing circuit. Cut blue, and you'd break the line to the charge the way you were always supposed to break the line. Blue was the truth the maker had hidden in plain sight, betting his whole murderous design on the fact that no operator would ever trust it, because the book said red, and the book had never once been wrong before. This is the moment, friend. This is the actual moment the whole story is built around. Not the cutting. The seeing. Elena Vargas, on one knee in the gold light, with a child's heartbeat under her left hand and a stranger's lethal intention laid out under her right, understanding the machine better than the page that described it. Reeves' words coming due. The book is your floor, not your ceiling. The best ones know the exact second the manual is wrong. She knew it. She traced it 3 times in the space of a breath. Red to the decoy, blue to the firing circuit, the collapsing trap waiting on the wire the book told her to cut. She knew it the way she'd known how the toaster spring worked at 8 years old. She knew it cold and clear and complete. And then the device knew she was there. Because the real timer started to run. Maybe it was a motion trigger. Maybe a dead man's element that had been holding and finally slipped. Maybe the maker had built in a delay that simply came due. It doesn't matter which. What matters is that the real timer, the one she'd already traced to the firing circuit, woke up and started counting, and the number it started from, the number Elena Vargas read upside down in the gold light with her hands an inch from a child's chest, was 9. 9 seconds. I have tried, over the years, to make people understand what 9 seconds is in that situation, and I've mostly failed, because there's no way to feel it from the outside. 9 seconds is forever, and it's nothing. It's enough time to think one clear thought and no more. And here's the cruel part. Here's where the maker was the cleverest and the most evil all at once. 9 seconds was not enough time to evacuate the radius. Not from where that boy stood. The cordon was still pulling back. The motor pool crew was still boxed. 23 people were strung across that open ground, and 9 seconds wasn't enough to clear a single one of them out of the kill zone. The maker had even thought about the clock. The maker had set the timer short on purpose, so that by the time it started, the book's clean answer, pull back, let it run empty, would already be dead. So the book had given her 2 choices, and the clock had just taken one of them away. The book's first answer, evacuate, was gone. No time. The book's second answer, cut the red, was a trap that would fire the charge into her hands and the boy's chest and the 23 lives behind her. The book had 2 answers, and one of them was impossible, and the other one was suicide and murder both. Which left the thing the book did not contain. The thing the book could not contain, because the book is a dead man's memory, and no dead man had met this exact device, and lived to write the blue wire down. Elena was holding a page that hadn't been written yet. She was the one who'd have to write it. And the only way to write it was to be right. Bet your life. Bet 23 lives right. About a wiring scheme she traced for the first time 11 seconds ago against a book that had never once steered her wrong. Cut red. Do what 14 years of training screamed at her to do. Do the correct and approved and defensible thing, and everyone dies. Cut blue. Trust her own read of the machine over the entire institutional memory of her craft. Be wrong by a single hair, and everyone dies anyway. But this time it's her call, her hand, her name on it. 9 seconds. The dead pulse, slow and even, the stillest thing in a rock. A child crying quietly with his hands in the air. 23 people behind her, who would never know how close the dark had come. And Elena Vargas reached past the red wire that the United States Army had trained her for 14 years to cut. She put the blades on the blue. The blades closed. And here is a thing nobody who hasn't done the work will ever quite believe. There is no sound. In the movies there's a beep, a tone, some mechanical sigh that tells you won. In real life, you cut the wire, and the world simply does not end. And the not ending is the only confirmation you get. The clock just isn't there anymore. The number that was running toward your death is gone, and the silence where it used to be is the loudest silence a human being can stand inside. Elena knelt in that silence with the cutters still closed on the blue conductor, and she did not move for a moment. She watched the device. The real timer was dark. The decoy timer, the liar, the red wire's clock, was still ticking down its meaningless count, and she watched it run all the way to 0 and do nothing, which was the final proof, written in the device's own hand, that she had read it right. Red would have killed him. Red ran to the trap. She'd cut the truth and left the lie to die on its own. Then she breathed out. And then she went back to work, because a half-defused bomb on a child's chest is still a bomb, and the dead pulse held while she finished it clean, isolated the charge, made the vest safe enough to come off, eased it away from the boy's body the way you'd lift a sleeping infant. And when the weight of it left him, the kid's legs just quit, the way a marionette drops when you let go the strings, and Elena Vargas caught a sobbing 14-year-old in her arms in the gold light, and held him up, while the cordon stood frozen in a wide ring around the two of them, 23 people learning all at once how close the dark had passed. That's the moment, if there were any justice in how stories got told, where this one would end. Catch the kid. Hold him up. Fade out on a woman with a dead pulse and steady hands who walked toward the thing and won. But I told you at the start there's a report. And the report doesn't have the boy in it. And it doesn't have the 23. And it doesn't have the catch in the gold light. The report has 11 words. Operator severed the blue conductor contrary to TM 9-1375-215-12. And I have to tell you how a thing that beautiful turned into a thing that ugly, because that's the part of the story that's really about us, about the people who weren't there, and the books they hide behind. It started, as these things do, with a man who needed it to be a problem. His name doesn't matter, and I won't give it to you, but his rank does. So I'll tell you he was a major, and I'll tell you what a major is in a story like this. A major is far enough up to have power over Elena, and far enough from the dirt to have never knelt in front of a live one in his life. He came in after. The cleanup, the paperwork, the incident review, the machinery that grinds along behind every event like this, generating documents. And somewhere in that machinery, a major who had never met a collapsing circuit read a sentence that said an operator had cut a wire the manual told her not to cut. And here's the thing about the book, the deepest thing, the thing the whole story has been walking toward. The book is not just instructions. The book is cover. The book is the thing that lets a man with no skin in the game sit in a clean office and decide who did right and who did wrong, without ever having to understand a single wire. To a man like that, the book isn't a floor or a ceiling. It's a wall he gets to stand behind. And from behind that wall, the situation was simple, clean, beautiful in its simplicity. The manual said red. She cut blue. She violated the manual. Doesn't matter that it worked. Especially doesn't matter that it worked. Because if it works when you break the rules, then what's the point of the man whose whole authority comes from the rules? Do you see it? Elena Vargas was a threat to that major not because she failed, but because she succeeded. A by-the-book operator who'd cut red and killed everyone would have generated grief and a folded flag and not 1 ounce of trouble for the major, because the book would have absorbed it. The book fired. The operator followed procedure. Tragic. Defensible. Clean. But an operator who threw out the book and was right, that operator was a standing argument that judgment beats procedure, that the man matters more than the page, and there is no one on this earth more frightened of that argument than a man whose entire authority is the page. So he reached for the 11 words. He didn't have to lie. That's the genius and the evil of it both. The same genius and evil as the bomb maker, when you really look. He didn't fabricate one single thing. Operator severed the blue conductor contrary to TM 9-1375-215-12 is true. Every word of it is true. She did sever the blue conductor. It was contrary to the manual. He just took the truth and pulled it up out of the dirt where it lived, cut away the third of the page that gave it air, the 2 timers, the collapsing circuit, the boy, the 9 seconds, the 23, and left the 1 sentence standing naked where it could be made to mean the opposite of what it was. He weaponized the procedure the exact way the maker weaponized the mercy, both of them betting that the system's own reflexes would do the killing for them. And below the sentence, in the recommendation block, he typed 1 word with no hesitation at all. Separation, which is the Army's flat gray word for ending you. Take the uniform she was the first in her family to wear, the uniform her mother cried over, and take it back, and put her out, with a paper trail that says she's the kind of soldier who doesn't follow the manual. Out. Done. 14 years and 23 lives, and a boy who got to grow up, and the recommendation is 1 word, and the word is separation. That's where it stood when somebody slid that report across a table to start a board. And that's where Elena Vargas's second fight began. The slow one, the one with no dead pulse to save her. Because you can't read a tribunal the way you read a wire, and the people across the table from her this time had built their device on purpose to look exactly like justice. But the major made 1 mistake. The same mistake the bombmaker made, when you get right down to it. He assumed nobody would trust the blue wire. He assumed the book would hold, that the wall would hold, that no one would ever pull that 1 true sentence back up into the light and show the 23 lives hanging off the bottom of it. He bet the whole thing on the fact that the system reaches for red, reaches for the procedure, the clean answer, the defensible reflex, every single time. He didn't know somebody was about to read that report 3 times. He didn't know somebody was going to notice the number that should have been in it and wasn't. He didn't know somebody was going to count the 23. Pull your chair in close, friend, because now I get to tell you how the blue wire got cut a second time. The somebody was a captain named Holloway. And I'll be honest with you before I tell you a word about him. I came near to leaving him out of this story the first time I told it, because the temptation is to make Elena save herself, and she's the kind of woman who should get to save herself. But that's not how it went, and it matters that it's not, because the whole rotten heart of what the Major did was that he counted on Elena being alone in front of that book. And she wasn't. And the reason she wasn't is a thing worth understanding, so I'll give you Holloway straight. He was a JAG officer, a lawyer in uniform, which is a creature most line soldiers regard with about the warmth they give a tax collector at a wedding. He was assigned to Elena's case, and not because anybody picked him for it, because it landed on his desk in a stack, one more separation board in a career full of them, the gray machinery doing what it does. He could have processed it the way the Major counted on it being processed. Read the report, read the 11 words. See the violation of TM 9-1375-215-12 sitting right there in black and white, and advise his client to take the soft landing. That's what the file wanted him to do. The file was built to be skimmed. Holloway didn't skim. And here's the small, ugly, true reason why. Because I won't pretty up my heroes any more than my villains. He didn't skim because he was bored, and he was good, and a good bored man reads things twice. That's all it was at the start. Not nobility. Craft. The same thing that made Elena clean her tools when there was nothing to do. He read the report a first time and something itched at him, and he couldn't have told you what, so he read it again. And on the second read, he found the itch. It was the number that wasn't there. The report described a vest device with 2 timers. Holloway was no Edie man, didn't know a collapsing circuit from a coffee circuit, but he was a lawyer, and a lawyer's whole trade is what's missing from the sentence. And what was missing was time. The report said she cut the wrong wire. The report did not say how long she'd had to decide. There was no countdown in it. There was no 9. And Holloway sat with that, because in his experience the absence of a fact in an official document is never an accident. Somebody always leaves out the number that hurts their case. He didn't yet know what the number was. He just knew that a sentence describing a choice had been very carefully written to contain no clock, and that the man who wrote it had a reason. So he pulled the third of the page back up out of the dirt. He went and got the things the report had cut away. He got the device itself, what was left of it, bagged and tagged in evidence, because they keep them. He got the post-blast and render-safe documentation, the dry technical record nobody reads. He found the photographs of the wiring. And he did the one thing the Major was certain no one would ever bother to do. He found somebody who could read the machine. He found Reeves. Master Sergeant Reeves was retired by then, years out, leather hands and all. But the EOD world is small, and it remembers its own, and it wasn't hard to find the man who trained her. And when Holloway laid out the wiring photographs on a table in front of that old instructor and asked him to explain, in words a tribunal could understand, what his former student had actually been looking at, Reeves went quiet the way Elena went quiet over a live one. He looked at the 2 timers. He traced the red conductor to the decoy. He traced the blue to the firing circuit. He found the collapsing trap waiting on the red wire the book said to cut. And the old man looked up at the lawyer and said the thing that became the spine of the whole defense, said it slow, every word weighed twice the way he weighed all of them. The manual told her to cut the wire that would have killed him. She knew it was lying, and she had 9 seconds to know it. Then Reeves tapped the photograph twice with one leather finger, the same 2 taps he'd given the manual on a table 14 years before, and he said the rest of it, the part that turned a technical opinion into something a board would have to look in the eye. I taught her the book is a dead man's memory. I taught her the best ones know the exact second it's wrong. I spent 14 years hoping she'd never have a day where she had to prove she learned it. She had the day. She proved it. And now you've got a man trying to hang her for the one thing I taught her that was worth a damn. That's what Holloway carried into the board. Not Elena's word against the report, the device's word. The maker's own handwriting, the wiring laid out so plain that once you saw it you could not unsee it. The red wire running to the trap. The blue wire running to the truth. The 9 seconds the report had so carefully left out, restored to the sentence it had been cut from. And the 23. Holloway counted them by name. He stood in front of that board and read the duty roster of the people in the radius that afternoon, all 23, one at a time, slow, and let the silence sit between each name, because he understood, the way the major had understood, the way the bomb maker had understood, that the whole fight was about what you could be made to see. The major had built his device to make a board see one wire out of place. Holloway built his to make them see 23 living people, and a boy who got to grow up, all of them hanging off the bottom of those 11 true words. It worked. I'll tell you that plain, because some stories in this world don't land right side up, and I'd tell you if this one didn't. The board read the device. The board heard Reeves. The board counted the 23. And the board found that Sergeant First Class Elena Vargas had not violated the manual in any way that mattered, that she had done the thing the manual exists to do, which is keep people alive, on a day the manual itself couldn't do it. The separation recommendation died on the table the way the decoy timer died, ticking down to a 0 that meant nothing. She kept the uniform. The major kept his too. That's the part that sits crooked, and I'll leave it crooked because that's how it sits in real life. Men who build their devices out of true sentences rarely answer for it, because you can't court-martial a man for leaving a number out of a report. He went on. He stood behind his wall. He's probably retired now, with a flag and a frame, and a story about how he held the line on standards. The world is full of him. But Elena Vargas walked out of that building still a soldier, and I want to give you the last picture of her, because it's the one I keep. It's not the gold light and the catch. It's a few years on, the war wound down, Elena out and home in that flat valley with the orchards running to the horizon. They asked her once. Somebody who'd heard the story asked her whether she cut the blue again, knowing it nearly ended her, knowing the reward for being right was a board and a man trying to take her life's work for it. And she didn't answer it the way you'd think. She didn't say, of course, and she didn't get hard about it. She thought about it the way she thought about everything, slow, and then she said, "The wire didn't care about the report. The wire was just true. You cut the true one, and you sort the rest out after. There's always an after. There's only ever one wire." That's the Deadpool's friend. Not no fear. Just the ability to look at the true thing and the safe thing lying right next to each other and reach past the safe one every single time. The bomb maker bet she'd reach for red. The major bet the system would. Both of them lost to the same woman for the same reason. She always cut the blue.